York State Climate Action Council. Today's convening is the 24th meeting of the council. We're holding today's meeting via webinar as a matter of safety and to allow broad participation from across the state. And I will now hand it over to Jenny Cox to walk us through the procedures for today's meeting before we jump into the agenda. Jenny?
Great, thank you, Sarah. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with this at this point, but just to ensure that we have another smooth and productive meeting, just want to remind you all of our logistics and procedures for today. The first is just to please remain on mute if you're not speaking so we can limit background noise. And we encourage all of you to join us on video if you're able, especially if you're commenting or asking a question. However, totally understandable if you cannot participate on video today. And to ask your questions or provide thoughts, we ask that you raise your hand using the hand icon on your screen. You'll see that under the participants, there's a little raise hand icon that you can click on. And when you're called, please go ahead and unmute yourself. And once you're done speaking, of course, put yourself back on mute. And all of these features can be seen on the right hand of the slide that's up right now. And finally, council members can direct any questions or concerns to our email address at nys.cac@cadmusgroup.com. And I'll turn it back over to Sarah. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jenny. Let's turn to calling roll to see which members of the council are in attendance. Can I ask NYSERDA's Valerie Milanovic to call roll?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Co-Chair Harris.
Good morning.
Good morning. Co-Chair Sagos.
Morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Ball.
Good morning.
Good morning. On behalf of Commissioner Bassett, Henry Splitoff.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello. Chair Christian.
Good morning, everyone.
Mario Salento.
Good morning, everyone.
Donna DeCarolis.
Good morning, everyone.
On behalf of Commissioner Dominguez, Carolyn Ryan.
Present.
I'm going to ask for Gavin Donahue, although I don't think we were expecting him, but just in case he had a change of plans. CEO Driscoll.
Yes, good morning.
I know Dennis Elsenbeck was having some tech challenges, but I'll see if he's on. Dennis?
I'm on, thanks.
Great. CEO Falcone or Rick Shansky, designee?
Good morning, Rick Shansky's here.
Great, thanks. Rose Harvey?
Good morning.
Dr. Howard?
Good morning.
Peter Iwanowitz?
Hi, good morning.
On behalf of President Knight, Ian Wells?
Good morning.
Commissioner Reardon? We'll keep an eye out. Ann Reynolds?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Great. I believe Secretary Rodriguez was planning to join us, but if not, in his stead, Keisha Santiago Martinez?
We're both here.
You're both here. Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Raya Salter?
I'm here. Good morning.
Dr. Shepson?
I'm here too. Good morning.
Great. Commissioner Wisnauskas?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. One more try on Commissioner Reardon. We'll keep an eye out for her. But given that, Council co-chairs, I note the presence of a quorum for today's Climate Action Council meeting.
Thank you very much, Val. If we could turn to the next slide, please. Certainly, it's great to see you all again. And here you'll see our agenda for today's meeting. Since we just met several weeks ago, we do not yet have the draft minutes from the last meeting to vote on, and will instead take those up at a subsequent council meeting. So first, Basil and I will say a few remarks as we typically do, and then we'll dive straight into the subgroup progress reports, including a final recommendation report out from the alternative fuels subgroup. Then we'll turn to discussion of feedback by topic, over the chapters of transportation, agriculture and forestry, land use, local government, and waste. This will include feedback from the public comments, as well as an opportunity for discussion of any unresolved climate justice working group feedback. And then finally, we'll wrap with next steps. So I will hand it over to my co-chair for the next slide, please.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you all again today. Dorian and I'll spend just a couple minutes going through some reflections over the past several weeks. So Dorian and I actually are together today, but down in Washington. Very excited to be invited to the White House for the signing of the ceremony celebrating the Inflation Reduction Act. So we'll be there later today, representing Governor Hochul, representing New York, and of course representing all of you and the really good work that we've been doing as a state over the years. So I guess this is a congratulations for all of us for the progress that we've made in New York and how that's helped to spur national progress. Next week, excuse me. Next week's also Climate Week in New York. We can all look forward to that as we do every year with a number of important rollouts. Stay tuned on all of that, but I understand all of you will also be engaged at some level in some of the goings on during Climate Week. So we'll look forward to celebrating and reflecting on some of that in the next Climate Action Council meeting. Back over to you, Doreen.
Well, thank you, and certainly more to come from an eventful day here in Washington. Next slide, please. So certainly it has been a busy number of weeks as the time has passed between our last meeting and today. Just to quickly highlight a couple of them. First, and most recently, many of you will have seen last week at the Advanced Energy Conference that Governor Hochul both attended and announced the award of $16.6 million for 5 long-duration energy storage projects through our innovation team at NYSERDA. Certainly, we talk a lot in these meetings about the need for new technologies, and certainly long-duration storage is one of them that we'll be looking toward in our highly decarbonized future toward 2030, 40, and 50. So that will certainly give us insights into this technology as it may relate to the needs that we see even within our own integration analysis. We also, earlier in September, with the governor, announced more than $6 million in support of insurance innovation for climate technology solutions. So certainly, given the scale of the mobilization we need to see under the Climate Act, it is evident that we need to engage insurance and other traditional financial entities as we advance our goals. So this announcement is an effort to do just that, both for mitigation-oriented activities, but also for climate resilience projects as well. So we're excited for this relatively recent effort to be up and running here at NYSERDA.
Great. Last month, at the end of the month, we celebrated the 1 millionth pound of food that was donated to hungry New Yorkers as part of the state's organic waste recycling law. Great milestone for us. That's 1 million pounds of food either donated to the hungry or kept out of landfills, and obviously protecting the environment from greenhouse gas emissions. So we can all cheer that. That law enacted on a bipartisan basis and now being funded in part by the Environmental Protection Fund, something we can all cheer, and is certainly something that we can look forward to as fulfilling some of the work of our waste panel in particular. We also got very good news from the federal government under the bipartisan infrastructure law, $25 million being awarded to New York State to help our well plugging initiative that we've been using for several years now to address these orphaned oil and gas wells across Western New York in the Southern Tier. So this $25 million is a huge boost to our efforts. Is certainly going to enable us to expand the work that we're doing to prevent not just the methane from escaping into the atmosphere from some of these wells, but also the fairly significant, in some cases, surface water contamination threats that these wells pose. Have another just brief announcement also from Adriana Espinoza, Deputy Commissioner for Equity and Justice. Adriana, if you're on, can you just quickly detail the news from your front?
Thank you so much. Yes. So we've also been moving forward with DEC's Community Air Monitoring Initiative, soon to be rolling out in the next 6 communities. That includes Brooklyn, Queens, Mount Vernon and Yonkers, Rochester, Hempstead, and Syracuse. And alongside, we have the Office of Environmental Justice at DEC that is releasing a series of grants for community-based nonprofits and environmental justice groups to complement this air monitoring work. We have an air monitoring capacity building grant that's open to all 10 communities. It's out now, and we are extending the application period to October 12th. And so I wanted to provide that update and encourage community groups across the state to apply. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Adriana.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly, finally, since our last meeting, we also had an announcement really notably growing our coalition in responding to what is going to be a significant effort from the federal government with respect to their hydrogen hubs funding opportunity. As you know, New York is leading this hydrogen hub effort, and earlier in the summer, August to be exact, it was announced that we have 2 new states that are joining us in that effort, Maine and Rhode Island, and we are now up to 60 plus partners in that effort. So certainly we see the private sector, nonprofits, academia, and governments joining together, a large body of actors really working in the same direction and really looking to maximize those federal funds that we have been talking about so prominently in the last number of months. So a big milestone there, and certainly more to come as the DOE funding opportunity advances. Next slide, and over to you, Basil.
Great. Thanks for allowing us to go through some of these really exciting updates. Lots going on in New York, lots going on nationally. So now we'll go to the subgroup report outs. Thank you to all of you who've been part of this incredible initiative over the course of the last few months. As you know, we've had alternative fuels, gases and transition in the economy-wide subgroups meeting on a frequent basis. So we're going to get some report outs from each of those. And to begin, Jess, I believe you're starting off with gas transition. Jess Waldorf.
That's correct. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you.
My update today will be rather. Thanks. My update today will be rather brief. At the last meeting, we gave a pretty detailed overview of the framework, key considerations, and then detailed guidance within each of our considerations. What we've done since the last meeting is had another meeting to review the public comments and climate justice working group feedback again, to make sure that our framework is taking all of those comments into consideration. We plan to have 2 more meetings after today to finalize the framework, to review any edits that the subgroup may want to propose for consideration to the gas system transition chapter to make sure that the broader narrative where our framework is going to be inserted aligns, and plan to provide a final report out at the next CAC meeting later this month. And with that, I believe we're moving over to economy-wide strategies, and I'll turn it over to Jared.
I know Jared was stuck in traffic and running late. He thought he'd be on by now, but maybe not yet.
I can see that Jared's on.
Oh, okay.
If Jared's got an issue, perhaps Maureen, would you be willing to jump ahead to the alternative fuels?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. We'll come back to economy-wide.
Okay, thanks so much. So as mentioned earlier, the alternative fuels subgroup had their last meeting on Friday. It was a fast and furious pace throughout the summer, and a lot of work was done. So we are going to be presenting our hopefully final report out here for the council's consideration on the work of the group. So this is our work plan here of meetings as they did happen. Next slide, please. And I did want to take a moment really to thank the subgroup. This is the membership here, in case, just to familiarize individuals with who served where. Everybody came prepared and did a really great job, and it was really a pleasure, my pleasure, to facilitate this group and work with them. Definitely appreciate all their effort and contribution to coming up with the guidance that we'll present to the full council today. Next slide, please. So just a quick review of the purpose of the subgroup. So the subgroup worked to develop assessment criteria, which would test the use of alternative fuels as they are represented in strategies in the draft scoping plan, and to make sure that the way that these fuels and uses are categorized are serving the purpose of helping us reach our emissions reductions and co-pollutant reductions requirements under the law. We looked at alternative fuels as compared to fossil fuels and not electrification, because the way we see the plan, electrification is first order, and these fuels are really only considered where electrification is challenging or it's a strategic use that helps increase our electrification. So we tried to maintain the comparison on that level. We looked at strategies against this assessment criteria in a number of chapters, and we'll be looking at those individual strategies as the presentation continues. We did not get to discuss the use of alternative fuels in the gas distribution system, and we will take that up at a joint meeting between the gas system transition group and the alternative fuels group, of course, maintaining the group under quorum to not run afoul of open meetings law requirements. So assessment of that fuel plus use will come at a subsequent meeting. So the information that the subgroup pulled together is guidance for staff in their work assessing public comments and proposing responses to those public comments and responses to any outstanding climate justice working group feedback for the council to consider. So this is a work product that will help staff take the council's position when they are reviewing these things and bringing forth suggested changes to the full council. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, and we showed at the last meeting, the full text of the assessment criteria. There were, the group developed assessment criteria jointly. These were the priority issues to ensure in the use of alternative fuels. So this is just a very brief overview of what was presented in a prior meeting, but that these alternative fuels need to ensure highest potential reductions of emissions and co-pollutants and prioritizing reductions in disadvantaged communities. That fuel use is best when it has grid benefits, reduces costly electric distribution system upgrades, helps mitigate peak load, reduces cost to achieve emission reductions, reduces cost of retrofits, adds safety, reliability, resiliency of the energy system, benefits consumers. Lots of important considerations. That there's a focus on these challenging to electrify or strategic uses that helps us make the best use out of our zero emissions electricity as we go on the course to 100% emissions free by 2040. And strategies should be reducing the use of fossil fuels and reducing GHGs as technology advancement and cost declines brings these emerging technologies and solutions to commercialization. And that the strategies should benefit in-state economic development, building markets for agriculture and forestry, where that can support emissions reductions and carbon sequestration in New York's lands and forests. Next slide, please. So we grouped the guidance topically because a lot of the strategies are quite similar in terms of their objectives. And the first theme, thematically that we'll look at is capturing methane from waste and taking that captured methane and using the biogas. So there's looking at waste streams from agriculture, from manure management, and waste streams in wastewater treatment plants and landfills. So all of these chapters, agriculture, the agricultural sector, local government, and waste, all had strategies around the use of biogas, capturing methane and using biogas from facilities, be it landfills, wastewater treatment plants, or manure management. So as a group, the subgroup thought it was very important to make clear in the scoping plan where a strategy is focused on the biogas versus the refined RNG product. So we'll go through the strategies and ensure that it's quite clear that which is the input fuel. And that all the strategies need to consistently and clearly articulate that use must demonstrate air quality, health, and greenhouse gas benefits before there is a decision for implementation, and that there should be requirements to avoid any localized pollution in disadvantaged communities that could be an unforeseen outcome. Next slide. The strategies should prioritize on-site use of the biogas whenever feasible. So facilities like wastewater treatment plants that can self-supply their energy needs from the biogas that treatment of wastewater creates should do that. They should be self-supplied with their energy. They should not be a priority for electrification, and that would make space in the system to electrify residential buildings and transportation. That this can help ease capacity constraints on the grid in certain situations. It can provide more electricity for other more beneficial electrification, and that we could focus that electrification in disadvantaged communities. And that if there's excess biogas from these on-site production, like a wastewater treatment plant, that off-site use locally can be appropriate if there's adequate demand, proximal adequate demand, and particularly where there's infrastructure or grid constraints where use of that alternative fuel could help, again, provide electric system capacity for buildings and transportation electrification. The strategy should include a preference for non-combustion uses, such as biogas and fuel cells. And there was also a fair bit of discussion around biogas production, creating electricity to power or charge a battery electric garbage truck or farm equipment. And that if you prioritize electrification of these heavy duty trucks that travel routes through disadvantaged communities, that's preference. All throughout the discussion, it was always noted that supply of RNG is fairly limited, and therefore that should be for strategic use or challenging to electrify applications. And use of RNG in existing fossil fuel infrastructure is appropriate when there's safety, reliability, resilience, or affordability benefits. And the group also acknowledged that in some instances, in order to achieve that safety, reliability, and resilience, there might be a need for minor or minimal new infrastructure to make that happen, and we should not foreclose on allowing those small improvements, investments where there are real benefits. Next slide. There was also a need to improve estimates of methane emissions from anaerobic digestion. There's lots of opportunities to understand better where the emissions are coming from and then put policy actions and controls in place to reduce those emissions. And that strategy should include policy considerations that minimize or eliminate methane emissions from biogas and RNG production to ensure that use of biogas and RNG is optimized for methane mitigation as a first priority, and energy production as a second, very close second. So emissions minimizing technologies and techniques should be employed, including having a highly trained O&M staff to ensure that these systems are tight and the leaks are found and repaired very quickly, that there should be minimal fossil fuel use in RNG production, that the management of biosolids and digestate from RNG production should be properly managed to ensure that emissions are minimized or eliminated from these byproducts. That there's a priority for in-state waste-based feedstocks, and policy accounting can even accommodate that through considering avoided emissions. That regulatory frameworks could be established to ensure these best practices are applied across any facilities that are built or retrofits to existing facilities. And again, as I mentioned, these AD systems should be built for maximum methane mitigation, ensure the development of well-managed, low-emissions biogas or RNG production. So I think I'll pause there for a second and allow any reactions or feedback from the council on this theme of methane capture and biogas use. And I think, can I see participants to see if anyone's raising hands? Yes, I can, I think. I don't see any hand raises. Okay, it's just not just me? Okay.
It's not just you. I don't see any as well.
Great. All right, so then we'll move on. Next slide, please. The next theme was transportation fuels. There's a recommendation in the transportation chapter around the use of lower carbon renewable fuels. The subgroup discussed the fact that prioritization of electrification in disadvantaged communities rather than alternative fuel use is the best course of action, but that some regions and some disadvantaged communities would have the need for significant infrastructure upgrades for electrification. So there's going to be situations where it's going to be hard to fully electrify without significant investment, and there can be applications such as hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and in long haul heavy duty trucking that could help with that. They could take the pressure off the electric grid, have some peak load concern benefit, have some distribution system upgrade cost benefit, and then again, as we mentioned previously, creating space on the system for electrification of heating and other applications, transportation applications such as passenger vehicles or local trucks and buses. That fuel should be assessed individually in policy development, but there again should be a demonstration of air quality, health, greenhouse gas emission reduction benefits, and including these requirements to avoid any localized pollution in disadvantaged communities. This should be a high priority. There was talks about individual fuel feedstocks and some known concerns around feedstocks of imported oils, canola, palm, carotenoid feedstocks, that they should be avoided. Their emissions profiles are not favorable. And that corn oil is typically better than soy, and waste oil should be prioritized, and including emissions control from the wastewater of waste oil separation processes. Again, similar to the discussion of RNG, ensuring that steps along the process are all controlling for any greenhouse gas emissions. And again, policy accounting could consider net emissions or a life cycle analysis and should include an assessment of co-pollutants. There was a discussion around how biodiesel and renewable diesel have lower particulate emissions than fossil diesel, yet ethanol can increase acetaldehydes. So that's things that should be considered across the board in the policy development, what is happening in the co-pollutant space. And that there was a discussion around bunker fuels for ships docked in New York State, that potential uses or replacement for those fuels can be beneficial for emissions reductions, and that again, biogas in fuel cells or electricity for battery electric garbage trucks are favorable applications of alternative fuels in the transportation space. So again, I'll pause again for any feedback or reactions on the guidance to staff of transportation fuels.
Hi, I didn't raise my hand, but this is Rose.
Hi, Rose, please go ahead.
In terms of hydrogen fuel cells for vehicles, how complicated is that to develop and ensure that it works?
I mean, I know a lot of heavy-duty vehicle manufacturers are looking into development of hydrogen fuel cells for those vehicles. I don't know, and someone who's more versed in transportation can help me with how commercially available they are. I think it's pretty small at this stage, but it shows a lot of potential future growth.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, great. Not seeing any other hand raises. We can move on to the next topic. Next slide, please. Which was research, development, and demonstration. A fair few strategies in the plan recommend further research, development, demonstration for use of alternative fuels. And this is reasonable because there is a lot that we don't know, as we've sort of highlighted in our previous slides. So agriculture and forestry has a series of recommendations. Buildings, electricity, and industry chapters all recommend research and development for use of alternative fuels. Next slide, please. The group recommends that all of the RD&D strategies should include leveraging federal resources. Many already do, as a bullet underneath the implementation steps, but that we should consistently ensure that that is included across the board, and that consistently all RD&D strategies should include rigorous energy, GHG, and environmental sustainability guidelines. There should be an analysis of air quality and health impacts of producing and using these fuels and best practices to minimize any impact, and research into mitigating localized impacts in disadvantaged communities. That the research agenda should include, life cycle GHG accounting, priority utilization for feedstocks with lowest GHG emissions with preference for zero or even negative emission sources. The research agenda should include safety, particularly when we think about advanced green hydrogen storage pipeline operations, as well as emissions controls that can reduce or eliminate emissions such as NOx from hydrogen combustion, and the potential for negative or positive impacts on other economic sectors such as waste management or agriculture. So these elements, I think, are represented across in those strategies, but we will make sure that they are consistently shown in every single RD&D strategy. And that is the sum of the work from the group. So I'll pause again for any questions, reactions, or feedback before we move to the next part of the agenda. Carolyn, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask back on the prior slide related to transportation, if the subgroup considered emergency vehicles, first responder vehicles, and how that would be captured in the deliberation.
I'm not entirely sure it was. I'll ask, I know Jared facilitated that discussion because I was on vacation. If anybody has any points on, I know that there was discussions not the subgroup, but the advisory panel level around like fire engines and ambulances and things of that nature. But I don't think the group specifically discussed. Is there a certain consideration you'd like to see noted?
I think that, you know, the mention of the use of hydrogen fuel cells in some applications, it might just be worthwhile to identify whether emergency services vehicles, first responder type vehicles would also be something that would be considered, as well as what you've listed here in terms of long haul heavy duty trucking. And I think all of those that were listed, certainly ambulance, fire, you know, I think waste removal, snow plows, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Any other questions? I don't see any hands.
I see Rick
Rick
Shansky's
Shansky.
hand is up.
Yes, hi. Just a question back on the biogas. I didn't catch the distinction between biogas and RNG.
Oh, sure. So to put it in kind of simple terms, the biogas is the like raw gas that comes off of a system, and RNG has been refined to pipeline quality and could be injected into a pipeline and be indistinguishable really from fossil natural gas.
All right, so is that a chemical process or is it a blending process or what?
It's removing impurities, different impurities that are in the raw biogas. I know hydrogen sulfate is one that's quite caustic and needs to be cleaned out, and other, you know, I think there's a fair bit of carbon dioxide in biogas that needs to be removed for RNG.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Sure. Bob, I see your hand is up.
Just to add a little bit more to that, the raw biogas is often 50% carbon dioxide and 50% methane with some of those other impurities that Maureen mentioned, hydrogen sulfide, phosphine sometimes. So it can be used, but it cannot be put into a pipeline, and it can't be used for transportation. It can be used on site for fuel cells and things of that sort. To remove the carbon dioxide, it's actually a very energy intensive process, so it increases the greenhouse gas footprint substantially.
Thank you, Bob. Great. Well, thanks everybody. And I think we can pass it over if Jared's able to.
I think if somebody could unmute Jared. He says he is still muted. Jared, you may need to press like *6 or something, unless we can do it for you. Jared. Yeah, I don't have control over that. You there? Okay, well, we can come back to Jared if the folks controlling the WebEx can help figure out why Jared's still muted. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think Sarah, would you think it would be okay to move on to the feedback topic while we sort out Jared's audio?
Sure. Well, let me just say can I just ask the Cadmus team running behind the scenes
He's not showing as muted right now.
Okay, all right.
So I think, unfortunately, I think that's all we can do, but we can follow up with him if there's an issue.
Okay, great. Let's do that. Sure. So let's move on to then slide 19.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And certainly, Jared, hopefully there's another way you can join, because I do think that's an important topic to make sure we close out. And just, I suppose, Sarah, I think maybe when we finish with Jared, we could just pause for any general feedback on the subgroups. But maybe for now, the thing to do is to transition to the other major topic, which was the feedback, digging in again by topical area. So as I said earlier, the plan today is to discuss the topics of transportation, agriculture and forestry, land use, local government, and waste. So Sarah, I believe you're going to kick this off by setting the stage for the presentation and discussion on these topics.
Sure. If we can go to the next slide, please. And I would just say, Jared, once you do get your audio figured out, you can either just email me or speak up, and we can jump back as appropriate. But before we jumped into the specific topics, I really just wanted to provide a brief overview of the approach that we're using to work through these topics. This is more of a reminder, as we went over this at the last meeting, and in case anybody had missed the last meeting where this was discussed. So staff has summarized the public feedback that has been received, sorting it into themes and actionable recommendations by chapter. They're also developing staff recommendations as to how the council could consider addressing this feedback. And we're bringing this feedback to the council for discussion and deliberation at the meetings through October. And not only will the council be considering the public comment feedback that was received by chapter, we'll also be presenting the feedback that was previously provided by the Climate Justice Working Group that was not yet incorporated into the scoping plan. And on this point, I just want to be clear here. So the Climate Justice Working Group feedback was characterized and presented in the draft scoping plan, and where possible, strategies were also clarified or adjusted to reflect the feedback. However, there were some cases where Climate Justice Working Group feedback was at odds with the existing strategies in the draft scoping plan, and the council did not yet have time to discuss and deliberate on those items prior to the release of the draft. And so it's that subset of Climate Justice Working Group feedback that will be presented alongside the public comment feedback chapter for the council to consider. And so during these presentations, they'll be led by the staff experts that are involved in the work of the chapters. And after we present on each chapter, there'll be an opportunity for discussion amongst the council. And staff will capture this feedback and the reactions of the council and use that information to help craft the proposed revisions to the text of the draft scoping plan, and then that will be presented to the council in red line form for their ultimate approval before action is taken on the final scoping plan. And so with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Adam Reuter to jump into our first topic for today, which is transportation. Adam? Adam, I can see your lips moving, but I cannot hear you. I see that you're unmuted on the WebEx, but maybe you're, I don't know if you have a headset in or if you might have the computer muted. Still can't hear you, Adam, I'm sorry. If you're able to, Adam, you could click the 3 buttons at the bottom of your screen and click on switch audio. And I think you have the option to have it call you. Perhaps you could call in if it's not working through your computer. Apologies for the technical difficulties. We'll just give this about 30 seconds or so for Adam to reconnect here. Jared, you could also connect in that same fashion. It looks like you are connected by phone, Jared, too. So hopefully this will work.
Okay, can you hear me now, Sarah?
I can hear you now, Adam. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, great. Can we advance the slide? Perfect. Well, thank you to the council for having me here today. I'm Adam Reuter. I lead the Clean Transportation Program at NYSERDA. And to summarize the feedback, first off, clean fuel standard was one of the most frequent topics of comment. I know we've heard about it through the alternative fuels group as well, but more generally, we received a lot of comments about the nature of fuels and whether each one should be encouraged or discouraged. Many commenters supported the development of renewable and/or low carbon fuels, while others were opposed to those fuels. Regarding the clean fuel standard policy mechanism, most who weighed in on that topic were in favor, with only one group representing the oil industry opposed to the mechanism itself. The extent of the reach of a clean fuel standard was a primary topic of discussion, and that, as Maureen noted earlier, was also a topic of discussion as far as the alternative fuels work group has gone, as far as which fuels might be preferable or less preferable. A number of commenters focused on investments in low carbon modes of transportation, especially public transit, walking and biking, as well as equitable transportation-oriented development. They stressed that investing in these modes of transportation and land use policies will be necessary to meet our goals, not just electrification. This is a really critical point, and a focus on broadening our interpretation of what we need to do to reduce transportation emissions. While that was certainly reflected in the draft scoping plan, was emphasized by a number of these commenters. Third, commenters focused on electrification supported the emphasis of the emphasis on that strategy, but had some particular areas of interest within that. One was direct-to-consumer sales, allowing direct-to-consumer sales of electric vehicles in New York State, providing additional incentives like sales tax waivers for electric vehicles, introducing measures to speed the installation of EV charging stations, both at the local level and from the utility level, and encouraging us to focus on electrification of other types of equipment, such as farm equipment, port equipment, and then freight sectors and other areas as well. Some commenters did express concerns about the potential cost of electrification, especially for certain hard to electrify use cases, and also expressed some concerns about some of the options for paying for these measures. And finally, a number of commenters identified a deep need for workforce development to support this transportation transition, especially to electrification, and to make sure that our workers in the transportation sector are trained in servicing and operating these new technologies. Next slide. With regard to the Climate Justice Working Group feedback, there were three areas that we identified that have not yet been resolved. First, in relation to community-based service enhancements, there was a recommendation to provide more details about specific public transportation enhancements. However, the draft scoping plan notes that these will need to be developed with the communities in which they would be implemented, because every community is going to have different needs. In most communities, multiple enhancements will be necessary. We agree that committing to a community-focused approach makes sense, and that we should provide the necessary resources for communities to develop plans and implement these new services. But we don't want to be too prescriptive in what they must do. I think that there is a way to kind of bridge that gap and acknowledge that that we have need for this community-based approach. And I think the Climate Justice Working Group would acknowledge that every community is going to look a little bit different in this, but while also making sure that we are providing those communities with the right tools to be able to take those approaches. For customer convenience and service connectivity, the Climate Justice Working Group recommended increasing investments in transportation alternatives, especially in a way that increases jobs in our communities. The draft scoping plan agrees that investments in alternative modes of transportation are critical and calls for an expansion of these modes, as well as other technology that makes it easier for people to use public transportation and related services. And then thirdly, regarding low carbon fuels, the Climate Justice Working Group opposed supporting renewable fuels, especially where policies supporting these extended the use of fossil fuels in disadvantaged communities. The draft scoping plan notes that 2 of the 3 scenarios in the integration analysis do rely in part on increased use of renewable fuels, and that a clean fuel standard could stimulate increased use of low carbon fuels that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and particulate matter emissions, but also that much is dependent on the specifics of program design, and that a clean fuel standard could be designed to prioritize other fuel characteristics, such as low criteria pollutant emissions and clean public transportation. Next slide. And so the key takeaway from these comments and recommendations are that regarding a clean fuel standard, we defer recommendations until the Alternative Fuels Work Group has completed its report and received further input from the Climate Justice Working Group. Regarding electrification, we recommend adding some detail on the potential adoption of portions of the Clean Fleet Standard, which is a California regulation under consideration, with a focus on reducing emissions in disadvantaged communities. This would need to be accompanied by appropriate funding to support the conversion of these fleets to zero-emission vehicles. That's funding for medium and heavy-duty vehicle electrification is already called out in the plan, but making sure that we link those together is going to be very important. And we wholeheartedly support enhancing our approach to workforce development needs around electrification of transportation. For public transportation, we support emphasizing equitable transportation-oriented development and the pairing of transit expansion and other low-carbon modes with equitable land use policies that support these modes. And we support expanding intercity passenger rail and freight rail service, which is important for our long-term economic prosperity and mobility across the state, not just within our communities. So that's our report out on transportation. Happy to take questions, or if Carolyn or Jared has anything to add to that, please feel free to do so.
So Adam, I see hands from Bob Howarth and Ann Reynolds and Dennis Elsenbeck. So we'll take those in that order. Bob?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Adam. Nice, clear summary. I put up my hand actually before this last slide. I was responding to the slide before where I thought you sort of went over too quickly the recommendation on the enhanced rail transportation in your answer to number 1. So you came back to that and highlighted support for more rail in the end, and I'm glad to see that. But I feel strongly that the council, the state really needs a better rail system. I live in Ithaca. We're not serviced. The nearest station is an hour-and-a-half drive from where I live. Binghamton is very poorly supported. Even if you go north, Syracuse, Rochester, the service is poor. So I think a highlight on rail service is really important. I also just I agree with what you've said about the renewable fuel standards and all, and I just want to point out that I think the report that Maureen gave today for our alternate fuels working group, she did a great job summarizing what we're recommending to the council, and broadly we are in agreement with what the CJWG has recommended on that. So I think we should be clear and commend them for that input. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Ann Reynolds.
Thanks. This isn't what I was going to say, but in response to it, but I totally agree with Bob on rail service, and I absolutely think that one of the best examples of co-benefits is if we have increased transit opportunities in disadvantaged communities. But what I was going to ask was based on the next slide. 2 things. So the draft recommendation, okay, so to consider the report of the Alternative Fuels Work Group is the report that we just gave, yes? But we want to wait until the Climate Justice Working Group comments on that report. Is that what you're saying? Not we, you.
Yes, but also I was writing that not having seen the alternative fuels work group report. So yes.
So I think that the Alternative Fuels Work Group, had a lot of really productive discussions and can inform these recommendations. I personally am hoping that the council recommends a clean fuel standard. I think it would be good for New York and help get some resources channeled to transportation electrification. But I hear that there's, I get that you got a lot of comments with concerns about it and concerns about false solutions. And I'm wondering if the staff could consider, putting forth some design criteria for the standard that would address some of those concerns. I guess what I'm suggesting is there's probably a compromise position that would address people's concerns and still recommend a clean fuel standard. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, I can certainly take that back to staff.
Next up, we have Dennis Elsenbeck.
Great. Adam, thanks. Appreciate this. Part of what I think we need to really emphasize on, because we talk about emphasizing workforce development, what I'm wondering if you guys looked at is how do we emphasize economic development so that we're broader in terms of New York leading in these type of objectives creates a lot of interest outside. That interest is either to take advantage of taxpayer or ratepayer subsidized programs, or perhaps attracting these businesses here into New York. So I always look at these and I really think we need to kind of like broaden our focus and look at economic development not as a separate entity. So let's say I attract somebody and I use let's, for instance, ESD incentive. Some of that incentive to the supplier could create a preferred supplier status because they're located in New York. And some of that would also include passing on some of that incentive that we gave to attract on to the end user. So connecting the dots, Adam, is what I'm struggling to try and talk about, as opposed to just looking at workforce for what? And then how do we kind of like create real economic opportunity based on New York leading in this discussion? Because I think there's tremendous job potential, especially in recreating our Rust Belt neighborhoods. So just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. I think so. Two elements of that I think are in here, and one is an area where we've already staked out a leadership position, and I think presents a great opportunity for that real economic development that you're talking about, is on school bus electrification. You know, the 2022-23 New York State budget included a mandate for zero emission school bus sales. 100% of new purchases of school buses must be zero emission by 2027, and 100% of all the school buses in the state must be zero emission by 2035. New York State has more school buses than any other state in the country. The combination of aggressive action and a significant market creates a great opportunity for attracting businesses to New York to build those buses, to service those buses, to train people to maintain the buses and to operate the buses. And I know that our colleagues at ESD have already been working hard to try to attract more school bus manufacturing to the state, but that's a great example, I think, of the type of the way that some of this leadership can help lead to economic development and workforce development as well. We've been working very closely with state ed and a lot of the trade groups around schools and school bus operation to think through what has to happen on the workforce side to make sure that our schools are ready for this transition. And then the other thing I would just mention is more on the transportation-oriented development side and land use side. That as we are doing economic development, as we're trying to attract new businesses to the state and supporting the establishment of new businesses, making sure that we are doing it in a way that also prioritizes the types of land use that we want to encourage and that are going to be supportive of transit and other low carbon modes, I think is going to be really critical. And those are the types of places that people want to live, that people want to work. And we have those types of neighborhoods. Some of them have not been invested in as much as they should have been. But by refocusing in those areas, I think that creates another great economic development opportunity that will also help us further these climate goals.
And maybe all I'm asking, Adam, is let's put that as part of your staff recommendations. Is let's emphasize economic development. It puts it out there that New York is open for business in that regard. I used to work with a company that developed battery systems for construction vehicles. And I've seen companies actually leave New York because there wasn't a commitment at the time. So all I'm asking is to consider adding economic development as part of your recommendations, some form or fashion.
Great. No, thank you, Dennis.
Next up, we've got Peter Iwanowitz and then Donna DeCarolis. Peter?
Hi. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to reflect on this clean fuels standard a little bit. And I know this was, Adam, your presentation was put together before we finished out our alternative fuels work group thing. And I think Maureen's presentation was good and spot on in that regard. But it also needs to be harmonized with what we'll be hearing from the economy-wide strategies subgroup later this month. And I know we haven't gotten a brief report from Jared yet today, but I mean, it's clear that, that group has wrestled with clean fuel standards and how to address the regressive nature of those standards, because for the most part, it's private sector transactions where the revenue sort of sloshes around in that sector. And because of that, it would, be really hard, I think, as the draft climate plan lays out there to address those regressive impacts. In addition, because of the limitations of biofuels, as Maureen's report kind of walked through, the address pollution hotspots and particularly of co-pollutants, as all state agencies are required to prioritize emissions of co-pollutant reductions and DACs, just becomes really problematic. And I think we should probably have a lot fuller discussion, not only as a council, but talk through not only the alternative fuels working group assessment of clean fuel standards, but also the economy-wide working group's assessment of the low carbon fuel standard directly with the climate justice working group. I would hope we do that to get their input. They were pretty clear that they didn't think that approach was worth going for. I think there's probably a role for something like electricity, particularly as the grid gets cleaner by mandate over time, for electricity to be that fuel that can reduce the carbon intensity of petroleum. It also has the benefit of a sector that the state can regulate how the revenue generated from those, quote, credits from electricity are sort of used and then dispersed so that we can meet our 40% mandate. So there's a lot of issues around there, and it probably really is, to me, clean fuel standard is constrained just to the electricity sector to, one, address the hotspot issue, and two, provide a pathway forward and mitigation of the regressive impacts of those programs.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Peter. It sounds like we will be hearing more about that.
Have we identified a process yet to engage the climate justice working group on this topic or some of the other ones? I guess it's a broader question, but I'm just curious as to what's the process.
Hi, Peter. We have not yet identified a process for engaging with the climate justice working group. We have discussed with them how we would be bringing up their feedback and going over that as part of the process to also consider the public comments, but they have not yet provided additional guidance as to how they would like to be engaged on additional elements of the scoping plan. Donna DeCarolis, you were up next.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Adam. Just a quick question. This was really to the issue raised before by Carolyn. Can you just speak to how we do the decarbonization for emergency response vehicles, fire, ambulance, et cetera? Could you just refresh us on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There are certain types of vehicles that could be decarbonized today. Others, the technology is still coming, and we think that the appropriate approach for electrification and decarbonization is to make sure that we are that we're taking things as there is appropriate technology. We don't frankly, one of the strategies that we've seen backfire too often is people trying to force a technology into a situation that it isn't suited for, and that tends to sour people from trying new things for a lot longer. So ambulances may not be the first thing to decarbonize, although we have done some work at NYSERDA on being able to plug in ambulances so that they're not idling 24 hours a day as they're out in our communities. So there are opportunities there for emergency vehicles and such, but we need to take it as the technology is available and as the right solutions are available.
Thanks, Adam.
And finally, I see Rose Harvey's hand is up. Rose?
Yep. Hello. I just wanted, this is a general comment. Adam, your whole example of, New York City school buses and decarbonizing the fleet. It just, we think about how to present all this material. It's technical. It was really a good example of also its relationship to economic development. As given the regulation, companies will move in. And I thought that as we make recommendations for the public and for everybody, that if we have a really clear, tangible example, it's a great way to explain, a general concept. So just a note. And thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm not seeing any additional hands up at this point in time. Just doing a quick scroll through to see if there's any last ones. All right, thank you, Adam, for that. And I think now can we try, Jared, your audio again?
Yeah, do you hear me?
I can hear you, yay. Let's go back to the economy-wide slide. I think that was number 8. There we go. Go for it.
All right. Well, after all that, I will be very brief. The economy-wide subgroup had its what we hope to be the final meeting yesterday. We have finished considering public comment. At the meeting yesterday, the group agreed on certain refinements to the rationale for implementing an economy-wide program. And then we've also refined 2 sort of high-level designs for 2 different economy-wide programs, one being a carbon tax, one being a cap and invest program. And in those high-level designs, we consider how those programs could be designed to achieve various goals of the CLCPA, including meeting emission limits, the statewide emission limits for 2030 and 2050, reducing emissions in disadvantaged communities, and mitigating leakage. And so we're still refining those high level design presentations by over the next few days, and we'll be prepared at I believe the September 29 meeting to provide the recommendations of the economy-wide group. As Peter mentioned, we did put aside the third option of clean energy supply standard, and basically deferred that to consideration in the sector chapters. So that's where Adam was speaking to the clean fuel standard. We figured that was a better forum for considering a clean fuel standard if we're doing it on a sector specific basis than in the economy-wide subgroup. So happy to take any questions on that.
I see that Rose Harvey's hand is up, but I'm not, that might be a leftover legacy hand from transportation.
Legacy hand.
Okay. Rick Shansky, your hand's up.
Thank you. Jared, just a context question. The 2 designs that you spoke of, could you say whether they incorporate or are distinct from the carbon pricing plan that NISO had been working on?
Well, Rick, this would be an economy-wide approach, while the NISO plan is just an electricity sector program. But as I said, we'll be providing a more detailed presentation at the September 29 meeting where we we'll walk through both of those potential designs in some detail.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any additional hands up for the economy-wide subgroup. So with that, I think we can move back to the chapter topics. And so if we could go to, I believe it's slide 25 on agriculture and forestry. Thank you. And with this, I'll turn it over to Brian Steinmuller and Brian Ellis to walk us through this topic.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This is Brian Steinmuller, and I am the Assistant Director for the Division of Land and Water Resources at Ag and Markets, and part of my duties is to administer our state's agricultural, environmental management, and climate resilient farming programs. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to go through the summary themes and staff recommendations, as well as the Climate Justice Working Group comments related to agriculture. And Brian Ellis, my partner from DEC, will go through those for forestry today. Just to kind of put our comments into broad buckets, and there were many different ways that we could have parsed this out. But one of the main themes was the cost to farmers and farming to meet these emission reduction targets. So there were several comments that were received in regards to the high cost and difficulty of emission reductions, as well as those for electrifying agricultural processing and agricultural equipment, which is not a topic that we took up in our particular chapter, but still was a noted comment. And certainly there was some consideration or concern with the potential loss of farms and farmland with the difficulty to reach these emission reduction targets. The next big one, and certainly along the same theme, are on both incentive structures and also regulatory strategies. So there are many comments in support of increasing current incentive programs. These are programs that address climate mitigation, resiliency, adaptation, as well as water quality and other environmental objectives. And our plan within our chapter certainly emphasized the scaling up of those existing programs, so there seemed to be widespread support for that. There was also support for new and innovative incentive structures, ways that we could think outside the box and continue to scale up adoption of practices with those incentive structures. An example of that would be the payment for ecosystem services strategy that is in the chapter. There were also several comments recommending regulations and fees rather than relying solely on incentive programs and voluntary adoption. And I'd like to point out this is consistent with the Climate Justice Working Group feedback. We also received comments dealing with our support for disadvantaged and underserved communities, specifically how we could build or address access barriers to programs and grant funding for further investments in those underserved communities. We also received comments regarding access to farmland in general, increasing or strengthening access to farmland, which will help us to increase diversity, equity, inclusion into the farming sector for underrepresented and underserved communities. We also looked at the broad greenhouse gas mitigation strategies, and there were certainly a number of comments within. And some of the themes were calls for food and agriculture strategies to account for their total climate impact, which would include fossil fuel use in production, processing, and distribution. Many comments were in support of further details on how we would reduce enteric methane emissions. Those are methane emissions from animal feeding. And those strategies should also include the use of cattle feed supplements and additives. Several comments called for increasing research and development. This would help us to quantify our impact with regards to mitigation strategies. and certainly also help to facilitate sequestration capacity on our working lands. And there were some concerns expressed regarding the release of farm operation data to the public. And as already been mentioned with transportation, there were comments both for and against the expansion of alternative fuels and low carbon fuels, in our case using agricultural products and byproducts as well as manure as a feedstock. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is this slide here discusses the Unresolved Climate Justice Working Group feedback. So I'm going to address the second and third. First, starting off with advancing alternative manure management. The Climate Justice Working Group did favor imposing regulation on dairy and other livestock farmers to reduce emissions, stating that the strategies outlined in our chapter rely too heavily on voluntary and incentive-based approaches to reach those mitigation strategies. Further feedback from the Climate Justice Working Group indicated a preference for manure management strategies to be upstream of the manure storage. So those are strategies that reduce animal waste generation at its source or reduce methane emissions from the management and handling of manure. I'd like to point out in the draft scoping plan the expansion of those incentive programs and successful voluntary incentive-based efforts were highlighted and emphasized, as well as increasing our technical and financial support for farms across the state. But I also like to point out that in addition to mitigating methane from existing manure storages, our strategies do highlight the need to address methane at its source, address farm by farm types of systems that could minimize methane emissions from the handling and management of manure. These could include composting systems as well as dry stack temporary storages, and certainly also intensively managed grazing systems where the land base and the farm management can support. With the advancement of agricultural nutrient management, the Climate Justice Working Group is supportive of the efforts to reduce nitrous oxide emissions through more efficient use of nitrogen fertilizers consistent with our strategies. However, they suggest consideration of a fee on such fertilizers as a potential mechanism to reduce their use. Where the draft scoping plan emphasizes increasing support for planning, technical assistance, and implementation of practices that reduce nitrous oxide emissions through our existing agriculture environmental management planning framework and our associated incentive programs. Next slide, please. So to follow up with staff recommendations dealing with the agricultural comments and those from the Climate Justice Working Group, in regards to regulations and feedback on fees, it's important to point out that we did reach general consensus among our Agriculture and Forestry Advisory Panel not to include new regulations or fees to scale adoption of emission reduction practices. Instead, our recommendations deliberately emphasize the scaling up of these incentive structures and programs that would promote adoption of practices while enhancing our sustainable agricultural sector. Very important was to avoid emission leakage that could occur if farmers could no longer operate in New York State, taking their businesses elsewhere, or succumbing to development pressure and taking those lands out of farming. That could lead to more emission-intensive development on those lands. So our panel did consider tools and different structures to scale adoption, but we want to point out here that we also emphasize that equally important and continuing state goal to build and enhance the ag sector in New York. But to address the comments on upstream manure methane emissions, I think we could add more detail to the conservation practice systems under alternative manure management, so it's more clear that it's not a one-size-fits-all, that farm by farm we need to be able to provide tools, resources to mitigate methane, both upstream of that manure storage and through mitigation of those storages. To address the high cost of these emission reduction targets, we really do need to emphasize that we plan to strengthen technical assistance as well as current incentive structures and programs, while also establishing new programs and fostering public and private partnerships, which was really important to our panel. These will all lessen the cost to farmers to adopt practice systems to reduce emissions. Further, there was a lot of discussion about how our practices that we're recommending and scaling for adoption are win-win-win, right? They would reduce emissions, they could increase resiliency and adaptation for our farms, and also impact the farmer's bottom line positively. So we'd like to emphasize those practice systems that do that and add more detail to that. We also need to strengthen the link to industry-led initiatives, as I mentioned before, that public and private partnership. There is a lot of initiatives out there already. For example, the Dairy Net Zero initiative and other climate-related goals, in which case, you know, our agricultural sectors will be moving in the same direction with the help of, you know, through our programs, policies, and technical assistance. As far as increasing support for disadvantaged and underserved communities, again, we can add more detail around how we plan to build access and build equity into farming and programmatic funding, and also to provide technical support for underserved communities. There was a lot of discussion and initial drafts that you know, we had developed that provided greater detail. We could pull some of that back into the scoping plan. And finally, greenhouse gas mitigation strategies. As we've already talked about, and electrifying farm equipment and providing low carbon alternatives for our farm equipment and processing equipment, we can emphasize the connection to other initiatives within the scoping plan. We also, however, know that a number of our practice systems that we would be implementing for the reduction of agricultural emissions also have an impact on reducing fossil energy use. For example, many of alternative manure management recommendations, as well as our soil health management recommendations, all have the ability for reduced energy use and more efficient operations. As far as alternative and low carbon fuels, I think we've had this discussion already, but we have deferred to the recommendations and the Climate Action Council's actions on those recommendations for the development and use of alternative and low carbon fuels. And finally, I believe we can strengthen the wording that reflects the need for further research to quantify our climate and related benefits. As we've discussed, it's awfully hard to quantify those benefits in a you know, natural system in farming, and more detail can be placed there to strengthen the wording, connecting that research to the adoption of practices and evaluating their effectiveness. At that, I think the next slide will cover the forestry section comments, and I believe Sarah probably would like us to take questions and comments at the end of both discussions today.
Yeah, I think that might make the most sense. So why don't we move into forestry, since it's in the same chapter, and then we can field questions at the end.
Thank you very much.
That sounds great. Brian Ellis here. I am the section leader for our climate, forestry, and carbon section at the Division of Lands and Forests in DEC. So we received a lot of very positive comments on the forestry chapter. There was widespread support for pretty much all of our recommendations within that chapter, though similar to the agriculture section, we did receive a number of comments discussing the use of incentives versus regulations through the chapter, and it was an incentive-heavy recommendations based on the panel, the agriculture and forestry panel. So we received similar comments in that vein. We also received broad support for the incentives that we currently had, incentives like Regenerate New York to assist landowners with planting and stand rehabilitation, 4ADA, and then future B and C plans that to reduce tax burdens on forest landowners and incentivize sustainable forest management, as well as tree planting programs like Trees for Tribs, which plants trees in riparian settings. We also saw a number of comments that looked for new innovative regulatory strategies or incentive strategies, such as the addition of an ecosystem service payment similar to the one proposed in agriculture. We received a number of comments requesting that forestry work towards something similar. Another large area of discussion in the comments was the importance of forest carbon storage opposed to carbon sequestration within our forests. There were a number of commenters that were in favor of improved forest management and also want to note the importance of forest age, structural diversity across the landscape, and a need for the plan to prioritize high carbon forests opposed to high carbon sequestration forests. And this was specifically noted as like a gap within the plan. Where we saw broad support from the comments was invasive species management recommendations within the plan. Almost all commenters supported aggressive control of invasive species across our forested landscapes, noted the need for increased funding to combat invasive species, as well as active restoration of those impacted sites. There were also a number of commenters that were concerned about overabundance of deer and the impact that that has on forests and a need for more comprehensive deer management within the state. And then finally, there were a number of comments discussing bioenergy and wood products. There was some disagreement within the comments. Generally, we saw a number of commenters who were in support of wood products in general throughout the state, and the increased use of wood products in building, especially in large building and wood manufacturing. They also supported the use of wood burning in homes. But then there was also a lot of discussion about biofuels being a false solution and that we needed to move away from biofuel use within the state. So there was a disagreement within that topic, and the comments were generally unsupportive of the cutting of forests solely for the use of biomass and biofuels. Do you think you could move back to the Climate Justice Working Group comments so that I could kind of discuss the forestry aspects? Perfect. So the similar to the comments that I just talked about, the Climate Justice Working Group noted that in the sustainable forest management section, there was a heavy reliance on incentive-based programs opposed to regulatory-based programs. And the draft scoping plan, in accordance with the forestry subgroup, proposed many strategies to support sustainable forest management and look at the key drivers of forest carbon loss within our forests. The recommendations included incentive-based and legislative-based proposals such as keeping forests as forests to prevent forest conversions, strengthening invasive species regulation, which is a large loss of forest carbon, and new tax law programs to help give landowners the tools to properly manage their forests. And these aimed at, again, addressing the largest sources of forest carbon emissions within the state and helping to increase carbon sequestration across the state. And then lastly, the Climate Justice Working Group expressed concerns over the combustion of biomass and biofuels due to the release of emissions. And the draft scoping plan in the bioenergy section did discuss strategies for the use of biomass and biofuels while providing their value in displacing fossil fuels and hard to electrify applications. And biomass and biofuel emissions concerns were raised, and addressing those through thoughtful planning and strategic locations is the only recommendations that section had, and we'll need to clarify the language that is in there to make sure that that the recommendations are in line with the rest of the scoping plan. All right, can we move to the next slide, please? All right, so on to our staff recommendations. So in terms of the importance of forest storage carbon, we want to incorporate more language throughout the document discussing the importance of forest age, structure, diversity across the landscape, including importance of carbon storage in mature and old forests. We also want to add recommendations to identify high carbon forests such as old growth stands and further research on the carbon storage in those soils and biomass in those forests. In terms of incentive and regulatory strategies, we want to integrate forest ownership in ecosystem service recommendations throughout. We also want to emphasize the importance and the impact of the current regulations that we have, such as keeping forests as forests and our forest tax law recommendations to improving forest management across the New York State landscape, especially in the context that the majority of forests owned in New York State are owned by private landowners who own small woodlots, and giving those landowners the tools to manage their forest properly is going to be critical to improving the resilience of our forest stands statewide. While overregulation of those landowners could lead to decreased management and more vulnerable forests across our landscape to invasive species and other impacts that we're currently seeing. In terms of bioenergy and biowood products, clarification in the bioeconomy section is important. We want to defer many of the recommendations to the alternative and low carbon fuels subgroup. We want to clarify the bioenergy scope, the use of agricultural wastes, low residual and low grade biomass, and not whole tree management. So the strategic applications of where we're looking to use bioenergy, and to further refine the language that defines bioenergy initiatives to align with the other sectors of the scoping plan to make sure that that section aligns with different sections that talk about bioenergy, as well as incorporate life cycle analysis and mitigation of co-pollutants. There were also a number of comments that talked about the connection of the forestry to initiatives with other sectors. So support of electrification of forestry equipment in the transportation sector, similar to the agricultural recommendations, the inclusion of mass timber products, cross-laminated timber, and low carbon building materials in the building sector is important. And the include more strategies in the electricity chapter to incentivize solar siting on developed locations, directly address carbon emissions from siting electrical generation on current forested lands. And we also want to recognize paper and wood products industries in the industrial chapter that use low-grade materials and are important to. We had many comments discussing those. I think that was all that I had, and we'd be ready to take some questions if we have any.
Great. It looks like we've got a few hands up already, and we'll just take them in the order that they came. So I see Bob Howarth, followed by Dennis Elsenbeck and Mario Salento. So we'll start with Bob.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Brian and Brian, for nice summaries. You covered a lot of material. I think it's a really good job. I do have two comments, one on forestry and one on the agriculture. First, on the forestry, I just want to draw your attention to some recent research from my colleague here at Cornell, Professor Christy Goodale, who has been looking at the carbon storage in old growth mature forests in New York, not just in terms of the soils, but actually in terms of the trees themselves, the biomass. And her most recent research, we had been thinking that as a forest gets to be 80 to 100 years old, it's not going to continue to increase its forest biomass. She shows that's not true, and which is really good news. If we take good care of our forests here in New York, they can store a tremendous amount more carbon than can forests in some other places. So I want to make sure you're aware of her work, and we really emphasize the trees as well as the soils in those old growth forests. And then on the agriculture side of things, can you go back to the staff recommendations for the ag slide? Back what, 3 slides is it? Yeah. Down there at the bottom, I mean, I generally agree with everything you say, Brian, but I'm worried about the conservation tillage there, your third bullet up from the bottom. And we've talked about this some before in the advisory panel for ag and forestry. Conservation tillage for sure will increase the carbon storage in ag soils, no doubt about that. But I think we really want to be careful not to have unintended consequences. And the one I'm worried about here is we have huge and growing problems with toxic cyanobacteria blooms, HABs, in the lakes in New York, certainly in the Finger Lakes area where I am. Increasingly, we think that nitrogen pollution from agriculture is a major driver of that. And conservation tillage in the wet climate like New York aggravates the loss of nitrogen and aggravates that problem. So it's helping with the carbon storage, but it's making the nitrogen pollution worse. There are alternatives. Cover crops, winter cover crops, both store more carbon and help with the nitrogen problem. We're switching to perennial cropping systems away from annual cropping systems. I think would be a big help, but it's a small detail, but I think it's an important detail. So I hope you'll consider that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob, for that, for sure. And I just tried to exemplify a single practice system that reduces the amount of tractor passes and fossil fuel emissions associated with those. But when we talk about soil health management, and I think we've had these discussions in the past, we are thinking about a systems approach that would include other practice systems that would deal with nitrogen pollution as well as nitrous oxide emissions. So thank you for that point of clarification.
Great, thank you.
Dennis Elsenbeck?
Thanks, Brian's. Appreciate it. Brian Steinmiller, the whole issue on agriculture, I think this is where balance has to come into play here, because when we look at electrifying farm machinery, which I'm pretty excited about when you talk like that, we have to balance that with extremely weak electric distribution network that tends to be in these type of areas. So really thinking about it, and Jessica touched on it, Maureen touched on it, this is where I think you got to balance this with maybe alternative fuels and really look at innovation, because I really think the farm community has a lot of upside economic potential if we look at it that way. I know we use the example of school buses. Well, can I tell you, everybody's looking at that, but farm machinery and that is all new territory, all new market territory. So again, I just want us to make sure that we're looking at this from a balanced point of view. When we make statements that we want to move these and lower their carbon emissions and all this, there is a balance, and the electric distribution system is weak there. But that gives us better opportunity to look at innovative solutions. And I think you touched on some of them, Brian, but I think there's more to say about that. I really think this is a tremendous market opportunity that not only will benefit New York, but all dairy states that we could lead on. So I appreciate your report, both of your reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
And Mario Salento?
Thank you, Sarah. I just have a quick question, and I know obviously this issue has been discussed in a broader sense across everything and all the work that's been done. But, and this is for either Brian, was there any discussion or questions concerning the workforce in the farm industry? They're historically the most disadvantaged workforce in the state. Anything regarding training or safety and health guidelines, shifting of responsibilities, anything about job loss, any impact at all? Was that ever brought up by anyone in any of the discussions, just out of curiosity?
Thank you, Mario. Those are great points. And I think just in the overall difficulty to the farm sector and the potential for farm losses, and for farms to bring their operations out of state or succumb to development pressure, I think that was part of the comment that especially in many areas of upstate New York, farm economy is vital, and supporting that farm economy, including all that works both on farm and off farm in support of, certainly was a theme of recommendations, primarily dealing with the potential loss of farmland if we don't take that balanced approach.
Right, so that sounds pretty much like an employer-based or employer-sided, and I get it. I get it. So is there some kind of, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, this starting from scratch here, but in terms of any kind of training that these workers may need, they're not necessarily always, they have a very specific skill set for what they do. Do we need to discuss how this could impact them down the line? And as the employers and the farm owners decide how they're going to go about the next steps here in transitioning from their end of it, how, if at all, and I think I know where it's going to go down the line, do we mitigate the potential economic impact on the workers? I don't know if you can answer that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm just saying that I certainly don't mean that. But there's a real impact down the line on these workers who, while they're beginning to have a voice on the job, the vast majority don't. And we're going to have to figure out how to work this out for them and really bring them up to speed so that they hear from us how this is going to affect them. Again, and part of this is a greater communications discussion as well, and we've talked about that in a broader sense. But particularly these workers, we have to make an effort somehow to make them aware of what's happening and possibilities down the road. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. Great points, and took note of those. Certainly as it relates to transitioning into various types of systems on farms, the only way that those run efficiently and effectively is to ensure there's a workforce there to do so. So that certainly could be a part of our recommendations as well, to ensure that level of training and support for that workforce is included in these transitions.
Thank you, Brian.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And I see we also have a few more hands. Peter Iwanowitz and then Richard Ball.
Maybe I could defer to the commissioner because I've spoken already and he hasn't yet this meeting. So I'll cede my spot in line, let the commissioner go because he may want to jump in specifically on this stuff, and I'll go after him.
Well, you're a gentleman, Peter. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. I just wanted to respond a little bit to Mario's comments about that. And I would say, yes, this is a back theme, certainly with the climate thought. But more importantly, those discussions are very lively and happening with our partners at Department of Labor, our partners at State Ed, and our partners at NICAM, who work with health and medicine on our farms and with our farm workers. So yes, those discussions are certainly happening. They're very engaging and pretty active. And that's the appropriate place for them to be. They do have an impact, obviously, on the broader view of climate action, which is what we're addressing here today. But just wanted to let you know that is very much on the forefront.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. And we'll have to talk afterwards about who exactly is going to represent the farmers, the farm workers in those discussions. But I appreciate it, and we can talk afterwards. Thank you, Richard.
Sure. Happy to do that. Thank you. I yield the balance of my time to my colleague, Peter Iwanowitz.
Okay for me to jump in, Sarah?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to check. We're running the meeting. So I look at the staff recommendations of agriculture, and first off to the two Brians, thanks for the presentations and run through. And I look at sort of this recommendation towards the bottom on greenhouse gas mitigation of deferring to the recommendations. Can we just fast forward to the forestry staff recommendations? Thanks. There's a slight sort of modification. This is going to sound like nitpicking, but it's important because we talk about sort of mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions under the bioenergy section of the bioeconomy thing. And I just, folks that have been part of the work groups that I've been involved in, both economy-wide and the alternative fuels, have heard me state this time and time again in those meetings. And I wanted to continue to bring this into the Climate Action Council because mitigation to me is a little bit of a weaker term. We really should be following kind of the statute and what the statute requires of state agencies and authorities. And just bear with me while I read the text for all of us under the law. This relates to Section 7. It replies to all state agencies. So it says all state agencies, offices, authorities, and divisions, which should include the Division of Budget, just as an editorial comment, shall also prioritize reductions of greenhouse gas emissions and co-pollutant in disadvantaged communities. So to me, it's less about sort of mitigation and ensuring that we are actually prioritizing. So when we have this broader discussion about biofuels, clean fuel standards, and the bioeconomy, we really are going to have to take that to heart because all the agencies that are then charged with implementing this statute and implementing the final action plan that we come up with are going to have to weigh that against the statutory obligation of prioritizing pollution reductions, not just of greenhouse gases, but co-pollutants in disadvantaged communities. So looking forward to those broader discussions with the Climate Justice Working Group and getting their thoughts on that, how we proceed, and also working with you all on it.
Thanks, Peter. I'm not seeing any additional hands up for Brian or Brian. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the next chapter, which we're actually going to be covering two chapters here. This is both land use and local government. And for this, I will hand it over to Sarah Crowell at Department of State. Sarah?
Hey, thanks, Sarah, and thanks to the council. Everyone can hear me, right? Just checking because of all the technical issues. Okay, good. All right. So thanks for having me today. As I think many of you know, I'm with the Department of State. I'm the director of the Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure. Really glad to be here today to talk about some of this feedback. I just want to note, as Sarah noted, land use and local government are actually separate chapters in the scoping plan. But because they were developed by a single advisory panel, and the strategies are really sort of intrinsically connected because local government holds such a central role in land use decisions. So this connection was really clear when we were reviewing public comments, and the staff group sort of found it difficult to tease out several of the themes that arose by chapter. So rather than presenting them twice and ending up with a lot of repetition, it seemed to make a lot more sense to present them together as a single set of themes and recommendations. On balance, I just want to note that we were really pleased to find that the feedback to these sections was really generally positive. And I do want to note also as an aside that we were able to integrate and incorporate the relevant Climate Justice Working Group feedback into the draft scoping plan, the current version. So we don't have any unresolved issues to address today in that regard. So we won't have one of those tables in this presentation. But so with that, let me just sort of go over the themes that our staff groups identified in reviewing all of the public comments. The first couple of themes do relate to forestry and agriculture. So Brian and Brian went into a lot more detail, and there's certainly some overlap there with those chapters and these, but we do have some sort of high level feedback, really reflects some of the stuff that you already heard, but on those topics as they specifically relate to land use and the recommendations in the land use chapter. So we did see a lot of support for the strategies related to protecting and enhancing forested lands. Specifically, folks were supportive of the incentives both to prevent forest conversion and also for initiatives, to prevent forest conversion, and also a lot of support for afforestation strategies as a way to sort of increase forested area across the state. There was noted a need to or a desire to increase support for incentives to create and maintain plantings. On the topic of agricultural lands, we also again saw a lot of support for ag lands, including for the initiatives to prevent ag conversion, both for regulations and incentives. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but there was also some concern expressed about the conflicts between agricultural, prime agricultural land and working farmland and solar, large-scale solar. So we'll talk about that a little later. There was also support for the recommendations related to protection of wetlands and for the utilization of natural and nature-based infrastructure solutions that were included in the draft plan. And then moving on to smart growth and transit-oriented development. These chapters, as I said, these chapters really, as you'll see throughout, there is just so much overlap with the different, with the various topics. It sort of creeps into the other chapters, but as Adam and Jared discussed in the transportation section, there really was sort of support in general for TOD as a strategy to reduce vehicles mile traveled and also for smart growth. But commenters did emphasize the importance of a contextual approach to smart growth and TOD and pointed out some of the differences between the need to acknowledge differences between what TOD and smart growth looks like in rural, suburban, and urban areas, and how the needs of those different communities and development patterns vary across the state. It's really not one size fits all. There are also some feedback around needing to prioritize the needs of disadvantaged and underserved communities, and how important, and comments about how important it is to integrate just transition as sort of an explicit goal in smart growth and TOD land use policies. Can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So we only have one way. So because we have two chapters in one, we have two. We did get our themes across. Our themes did spread across two slides, so we got more here. But as we heard in the, so I think as you heard in the transportation chapter, there really is there was real concern about the implications, or the implications for local government in terms of cost and sort of the burden on local government to help implement a lot of a lot of the recommendations in the plan. And so there was broad support for providing local communities with the tools they need, financial and technical assistance tools that they need. And so specifically in this chapter, we noted a lot of support for some of the specific recommendations, including provision of modeled zoning and local laws, providing mapping tools, access to models, examples of successful projects, provision of guidance, and of course, grants and funding. Some commenters also noting the need, that local government, really needs assistance in developing and supporting capacity, advocated for direct financial and technical assistance for sort of entities within local government. So for CACs and EMCs, environmental management councils, and other municipal bodies that really are key to implementing some of these recommendations. In addition, there was, in addition to being, to talking about support for local government, there were quite a few comments about discussing the value of regional partners to local government. Again, sort of harkening back to the need for additional capacity and for various, for partners of various levels to really help implement all of these recommendations. So there were quite a few comments asking for consideration of NGOs and land trusts and other sort of regional entities serve as in their role, to consideration of the role of those entities in conservation and protection efforts for both for forested, agricultural land, and also general land use planning. So acknowledging and sort of supporting those roles in the strategies. There were also a few comments specifically about the county role in CCA. I know, and again, that touches on electricity as well in some of the other chapters, but there was notable support for making counties eligible to sponsor CCAs. That seemed worth highlighting. And finally, renewable energy siting, again, a topic that crosses many chapters, but relevant to sort of local government and land use. There were a lot of comments that emphasized the need for additional support for local government specifically, to support them as equal partners with developers and other entities to ensure appropriate siting of renewable energy projects. So that that support includes sort of both the planning, assistance in preparing for developers for planning for the use, and in sort of working with developers to ensure that that development is done in a way that makes sense for everybody. There were numerous comments talking about the conversion of farm and forested land for renewable energy projects, and real concern about those conflicting uses. And there was also support for a comprehensive research on the productivity of the integration of agriculture and solar as a combined system. So there was quite a few comments about developing of agrivoltaics, both doing more research to determine what works in New York State, and implementation across the state. So I think that basically covers the primary themes. Go to the next slide, please. I'll go into recommendations now. So as you can see, I mean, a lot of the comments were supportive. So some of them don't really, require any changes to the scoping plan, but we thought they were worth highlighting. A few things that the staff group did identify, a few areas the staff group did identify as places where we really should revisit the scoping plan and make some changes were in afforestation and reforestation, to sort of revise and make more robust recommendations related to these topics, and sort of making more specific goals to define the need, and sort of making that section a little bit more robust even than it is. On smart growth and TOD, we want to work on the language to more clearly articulate the differing needs of the rural, suburban, and urban areas, especially with respect to smart growth and TOD, focusing on there's obviously less public transit in rural areas, or different types of public transit. Urban areas have, both areas have affordability issues that need to be considered, and equity issues. So really articulating what those needs are and how they can be reflected in implementation of some of these strategies. And we also recommended emphasizing the principles of just transition and the needs of disadvantaged communities in the definitions of, specifically in the definitions of priority development and priority conservation areas as they're presented in the plan. There is quite a bit of discussion already about equity and focusing on the needs of disadvantaged communities, but we think a more targeted integration of those specifically in definitions would be is warranted. On the local and regional support, sort of expanding and putting greater emphasis on the roles of the entities, the NGOs, the land trusts, those regional partners is warranted. Also, clarifying the recommendations related to technical and financial support, clarifying that those recommendations do make that the technical and financial support would extend to the municipal bodies such as CACs and EMCs that were of concern to some of the commenters. And on renewable energy siting, again, this is an issue that of course goes beyond the land use and local government chapters, but is with respect to those chapters, we felt that we see a need to, or an opportunity to really emphasize that the tools, emphasize and sort of expand the discussion of the tools and resources that can be provided to localities to ensure that those include resources to help municipalities understand and evaluate the impact of energy siting on forest and agricultural lands, and gives them the tools they need to make those decisions and help direct energy siting in a way that makes the most sense for everyone. And we also wanted to add some specific recommendations to include consideration of co-locational opportunities for ag and renewable energy generation. So to acknowledge and address the comments about agrivoltaics and bring those into this chapter. I believe that's sort of the end of the recommendations. Open to questions, comments.
Thank you, Sarah. Dennis Elsenbeck has his hand up. Dennis?
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the overview. I want to focus on smart growth because we use that term a lot. And I like the idea that we need to spend a little bit more time differentiating the needs. Because one aspect of smart growth is actually economic development backfill. And so when we think about transportation as part of smart growth, I look at it as that's yet another load that we're going to be adding to these communities that lack infrastructure already. So kind of like when we look at this, I think we have to take a more holistic view. New York has smart growth legislation. It doesn't govern directly utilities, electric and gas utilities, that's under the Public Service Commission. So I think we got to kind of like when we think about smart growth and as we differentiate and we look at this, I think we have a real opportunity of upgrading the infrastructure in these type of communities and then co-locate supply and demand, whether it's under a microgrid heading or some other approach, because then you can, instead of always locating your major renewable energy sources in forests and ag land, you could start thinking about co-locating because that's where we need resiliency. We need infrastructure in order to do the backfilling economic activity under smart growth.
Yeah, thank you. I'll bring that back to the group. I think those are good points.
I'm not seeing any more hands at this time. Just doing a quick scroll and see if additional ones pop up.
Sarah, I don't see mine, but I have a quick one for
Sarah. Go for it. Yep.
So Sarah, thanks for the presentation. Wonderful walkthrough covering 2 chapters, which is a lot. Under smart growth and transit-oriented development, that second highlight there, emphasize principles of just transition. How do you have, does the staff or should we talk about as a council of how we actually accomplish that, emphasizing the principles? Like who are we going to talk to, where we're going to draw on expertise from outside of the CAC to understand how we emphasize or better emphasize the principles of just transitions? I mean, we are planning a discussion with some of the climate justice working group members who are deep in the weeds on this in their communities, or?
Yeah, I think that that's it. It is a tricky topic to get our arms around, and we do need to get it right. I think, one of it will require more discussion. This is sort of the beginning of that. We'll have to work internally, and we'll work with the Just Transition working group as well to ensure that their recommendations are, their recommendations are reflected in here. I do think one of the ways that it can be done is to ensure that it's sort of getting into the weeds of the recommendations, but there were, central to some of the implementation of the smart growth and TOD in the plans was to, in the scoping plan, was to define priority development at a local and regional level, define these areas that will focus on for development and focus on for conservation, and ensuring that those definitions require consideration of as part of those definitions and selection of those areas. They need to consider the implication of those definitions on, you know, a just transition, and affordability and equity. I know that's a high level answer. It's not a specific, you know, there's a lot more that needs to be done. I think we're going to have to really look throughout the chapter and determine how best to integrate it. We will be working with the Climate Justice Working Group as well. So that's not, you know, I think the answer is yes, agreed. It's complicated and we need to get it right. And we will be circling back with you on that to make sure that what we do and what we add to the chapter is hopefully to the best of our ability does address these needs. And it will be an ongoing, I think, challenge that won't be fully addressed in, you know, can't be fully addressed in any one recommendation or implementation. It's something that needs to be sort of integrated throughout, and we just need to be aware of it constantly.
Okay, look forward to sort of chatting with you a little bit further on it as sort of the draft chapters come into final relief. And I'm sure we'll get into this when we talk about the Just Transition chapter as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm not seeing any additional hands on this topic. So thank you, Sarah Crowell. I think we can now turn to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to David Vitale of DEC to walk us through the waste feedback. David?
Hi, I'm Dave Vitale. I'm the Director of the Division of Materials Management at DEC. We move to the next slide, please. So for the summary themes for the waste side, we did have widespread support for almost everything in the plan, actually. Widespread support for the waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and extended producer responsibility components of the plan. Most comments actually indicated that the action should go farther and faster than were even presented. For the organics and diversion of organics from disposal, widespread support, again, for expanding those efforts. Again, some of it is farther and faster and more specific than what was even presented. So an expansion of the food donation, food scraps law, both on who would be covered and also the elimination of the 25-mile restriction for location of organic recycling facilities. That's currently in the law. Support for increased funding from the state for co-digestion of food waste at the water recovery, resource recovery facilities. Support for market work related to organics and organic waste products. And more support, even more support for the emphasis that we already have on food donation and the law. Where we did have some divergent views related to combustion and other thermal processes, thermal treatment processes. We did have a number of comments supporting combustion as a better climate alternative to landfills as a disposal mechanism. But we had significant comments as well related to concerns with co-pollutants and other impacts on disadvantaged communities. So that's kind of it in a nutshell of what we had for waste. Next slide, please. So what we're considering unresolved, potentially unresolved feedback relates to a few items. One is the organic waste reduction. The Climate Justice Working Group was certainly very supportive of food scraps and yard waste being eliminated from disposal, and certainly the landfills. And so they identify that as something they strongly supported, which was in the scoping plan. They did, however, identify the food donation side as something that they would look for even stronger work on. Trying to touch all different, everybody that could be donating, including hospitals and institutions. So expanding the existing law somewhat to make sure that we direct as much food as possible to the hungry. So the plan certainly has an expansion of the law identified. The law currently requires all covered entities to donate edible food to the maximum extent practical in the law. So I guess the one of the items that still needs some thought is it all ties back to the law. Does the law get expanded, add in hospitals that had been eliminated from the initial law? So does it expand the scope? And is that language that's in there now related to the maximum extent, is that strong enough? Or is there adjustments that should be recommended to legislative change? Another item was waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. Again, very strongly supportive of all of the components. Some recommendations of clarifications that could be put in, but everything was still very supportive of all the waste reduction and recycling. The one item that they did have was requesting convenient recycling collection programs throughout the state, putting requirements specifically for that, and making sure the programs received adequate funding. So the scoping plan certainly has many items related to support and expansion of waste reduction and recycling. It includes a fee for waste disposal on every ton as a disposal disincentive kind of surcharge. That would then be directed funding wise. Any funding that comes in from that would be directed to municipalities to help support their existing waste reduction and recycling program. So there's a mechanism for increased funding through that. It also includes numerous policies on reuse options and by request only kinds of policies to phase out single-use plastics and packaging, textiles recycling enhancements. So there's a number of those. So where the I guess consideration needs to be is does there need to be changes in the law? The existing law that requires municipalities have individual laws for waste reduction and recycling and source separation requirements to somehow provide specific language related to convenient recycling programs, what that would mean for them. One of the things in the EPR laws, the extended producer responsibility, one of those concepts in the packaging and paper products is requiring convenient collection. So some of the consideration is in the which are the right laws to include those, and does that need to be specifically called out in the scoping plan? The next two, one related to water resource recovery facilities conversion. This the working group favored on-site use of biogas captured in them, but no new significant transmission infrastructure should be supported. So that was already kind of addressed and is being addressed by the alternate fuels subgroup. And in their discussion, they already had that as a comment or an item. The last one is biogas use. And again, they expressed that biogas could play a role. That's could be a good role, but it was important not to inadvertently lead to extended use of fossil fuels. That also was addressed by the alternative fuels subgroup and in their discussion earlier today. Next slide. So for staff recommendations, increasing funding and legislation for waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. So legislation to support that disincentive, disposal disincentive surcharge to help per ton to help fund waste reduction, reuse, and recycling. would create a funding source to help municipalities support efforts for reducing single-use plastics, expanding reusable and refillable options. So those are components that are included. Legislation for comprehensive EPR. So strong support for the paper and packaging components of EPR. Touches a significant percentage of the waste stream. Between those two components, it's about 40% of the waste stream. So that's an important component, and ultimately framework legislation to tackle multiple individual products that fall outside of that paper and packaging realm. Amendments to the food donation and food scraps, the existing law, to require smaller food waste generators to have that apply to, as well as removing some of the exemptions that I had mentioned earlier, and eliminating that 25-mile requirement for the recycling. And last one is supporting enhanced regulations for leak monitoring and reduction at solid waste facilities. So coming up with a comprehensive set of new regulations requiring monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions and reductions of leaks at solid waste facilities. So those are the recommendations that have been made related to waste. That's it for our sector.
Thank you, David. We have a hand from Paul Shepson. Paul?
I realized I had my video off. Thank you for that. I just have maybe a couple of combined questions about the issue that you raised about support for combustion of organic waste as an option, which then connects to issues about environmental justice and co-pollutants. Was there an analysis of currently available technologies at combustion facilities for removal of the toxic co-pollutants via various kinds of scrubbers and other removal mechanisms? And or did you discuss citing options to help mitigate the environmental justice issues? And I'm also curious, because I'm not really up to speed on the literature, about the state of the science, sort of looking at full life cycle with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, comparison of combustion as an option versus production of biogas. Has that been looked at carefully in producing your recommendations?
Well, as far as the emissions and co-pollutants, we certainly had discussions with our Division of Air Resources about existing technology, and they feel that the existing technology that is available can address the co-pollutants, even within our requirements. We're not encouraging the combustion of organics themselves, so it's not necessarily a competition between organics. Actually, the organics are, all the recommendations relate to removing organics from both the combustors stream as well as the landfill stream. So it's not necessarily a competition of those. However, there has been evaluation related to the impacts related to combustion versus other methods for organics. Organics reduction, individual management is better than combustion from a greenhouse gas perspective. Combustion has been indicated to be a better for greenhouse gas impacts than landfilling. So those are kind of the works that had been done related to that and were considered by the panels.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any additional hands at this time. Oh, Peter Iwanowitz?
Yep. Thanks, Sarah. Late arrival. Just to follow up on that discussion about combustion. Dave, was there any discussion, within the staff recommendations as it relates to combustion? I mean, I guess if somebody wants to burn whatever is left over that's being diverted or reduced, somebody could burn it, but not for the sake of energy production because of the statutory limitations on what can produce electricity in New York has to be zero emissions by 2040. But was there discussion in the public comments about that issue? And certainly it doesn't apply as a renewable energy resource either for 2030's goals. So just curious about that whole issue of zero emissions and how it applies to the discussion about combustion of any waste.
Yeah, there were really no specific comments that related to continuing combustion without energy recovery. Currently, the waste stream, about 15% of the waste, municipal solid waste in New York is combusted in the 10 municipal waste combustors in the state. There was no discussion and there's no recommendation for increasing that specifically, but there were no specific comments that came in that talked about combustion without energy recovery.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and for all of us at the council to sort of appreciate a little bit, because the standard for electricity generation is zero emissions by 2040, not anything else. And that was kind of adjudicated during the legislative process in 2019 when the executive was looking for a different standard of carbon neutral, but the legislature landed, I think, quite wisely on a zero emission standard for 2040. So we're anticipating that that holds, and there won't be any combustion of municipal or solid waste or pyrolysis of it to generate electricity.
We've got Ann Reynolds. Ann, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that Peter raises a good point. It's definitely a wrinkle, and I don't have an answer to it, but I am curious if the 10 combustors that are in New York, much like the nuclear plants have an end to their license, if they currently have the likelihood of operating after 2040 with nothing else, the law notwithstanding, if they would be operating after 2040. And I'm also curious, this is just curiosity, if those 10 are located in disadvantaged communities. I have no idea.
As far as operating after, the current permits, they receive a solid waste management facility permit. They also receive an air permit for their operations. From the solid waste management facility side, most of the permits are 10-year permits. So it's still within the time frame of 2040. If they had to be adjusted as 2040 came about, then the permits, they have the ability to modify those permits. So it doesn't mean everything has to be a 10-year. It could be modified in the future if that was called for, to end a permit at whatever time period. As far as the facilities themselves, there's annual maintenance that's required, things like that, but there's not really a service life limit on equipment. It depends on the equipment and the performance of itself. Most of them have been operating for 25 years or more now. So enhancements may be necessary at some, but it's usually routine maintenance at this point in time. There could be some consideration by those facilities themselves that I'm not aware of, that they want to do major restructure, but I'm not aware of any great concerns with any kind of operating equipment now. As far as the locations, 4 of the facilities are in Long Island, 2 are in the Lower Hudson Valley, 1 in Westchester, 1 in Dutchess. 1 is up in Hudson Falls. 2 are in Mid-State, 1 in Onondaga, 1 in Oswego. And then the last one is in Buffalo area.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
You might be one of the only people that have that all memorized.
Perhaps.
I'm not, I see hands from Peter and Paul, but I'm guessing those are legacy hands. If they aren't, please go ahead and ask your question. And I'm not seeing anything additional here, so I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item.
Great. Sarah, well, we're getting close to the end here. Thank you to all the staff that pulled all that incredible information together. Really impressive. And I can attest to Dave's encyclopedic knowledge of anything. He's an extraordinarily impressive human being. So I'll boomerang it right back to you, Sarah, to bring us home.
Great. Thanks, Basil. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as we mentioned at last month's meeting, given the volume of work remaining before the council will continue to meet twice a month through the end of the year. Here we show what the tentative schedule is. It's also posted to the Climate Act website. I will make note that meetings from here on out will be in person. And so we will be finding locations for these meetings, and those will be announced on the website as well. And we'll certainly be sharing those with the council members as we determine those locations. The next 3 meetings through the end of October will largely focus on the subgroup's final report outs, and we'll work through the remaining chapters topic by topic. We also, I believe for the next meeting, we should have some integration analysis results related to sensitivity analysis. And so we'll use the meetings through October to continue to go through and discuss this feedback. The aim is to have a revised red line draft of the scoping plan to the council in October, towards the end of October. And then we'd use the meetings in November to gather feedback from the council members. And the meetings in December would be for any resolution of final issues and a vote on the final scoping plan. And so that's really just laying out what we have ahead of us. You heard today from the subgroups. We're planning on having the economy-wide subgroup report out do their final report out at the next meeting. It sounds like the gas system transition group might be ready as well. And so if that looks to be the case, we'll try to put both of those on to have the final subgroup report outs along with some additional chapter topics to talk about. And so with that, I think
Sarah, I've got a question. I have my hand raised. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, I didn't see it, but I was going to say with that, I'm ready to take any questions. So go ahead. Ryan.
Oh, all right. Well, could you clarify again I heard you say there's going to be that some of the meetings are going to be in person, and was I correct in hearing that? I know that had been brought up before.
Yes, you're correct in hearing that. I want to get this right. The COVID emergency powers that the governor had, those were she allowed those to lapse yesterday, and so going forward, we are no longer allowed, due to open meetings law, to conduct the meeting purely virtually. And so we will need to have in-person location or locations, and we'll need at least a quorum in person. There may still be the opportunity for virtual attendance for some members, but we certainly need to have a quorum in person.
I understand there's a need for a quorum. I will say that we will need to have some kind of a virtual option. I understand there's a lot of logistical juggling, but as we've doubled up the meetings, it's going to be literally impossible for many council members, certainly myself, who do not live in close to Albany to come to all the meetings. You know, it just won't be possible. And I understand there's some logistics to get quorum, but I just strongly request that, you know, we try and accommodate folks who just won't be able to make it in person because of distance.
Absolutely. Your concern is shared. We certainly want to make sure that we have as many council members in attendance in whatever form that we're able to. And so we are working on figuring out the details of that, and we'll be in touch. We'll also be looking at if there's the potential for, you know, to have multiple physical in-person locations. So perhaps we have one downstate and upstate, and so we'll be in touch with council members as well.
Oh, that's great. I remember it worked. Some technical issues, but I think it was Long Island City, you know, so here to make it work. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Yep, no problem. Any additional questions from the council members? Donna DeCarolis?
Sarah, thank you. Mine might be more of just like a process question. So, you know, today we went through recommendations and staff's view on the comments of both the public comments and the Climate Justice Working Group. How do we, and then I think we'll go from there to red lines, it sounds like, is that right?
Yes.
How do we, I guess it's you all, decide how much weight to give the comments, you know, the degree of comments? Yeah, so, and I understand the role of the Climate Justice Working Group, I think very well, I think. So I think it's more, my question is related more to the general comments. You know, there's been a lot of them, they focus on different areas. How do we weight those, or is that yet to be decided?
Yeah, so I think the way we're bringing forward the materials are, you know, we're looking at what are the themes that we're, you know, obviously we've got a lot of comments, and so we're trying to say what are the ones that we heard most frequently from also from entities that are kind of in the field, you know, in those areas. And so you know, what we've presented today and we'll continue to present are what we see as kind of the staff, you know, a broad staff team looking at all of these, and these are kind of the big things that keep coming up. And so we're really trying to you know, highlight where we as a staff team are seeing kind of the common themes and elements of the comments. But certainly we have provided access to the council members for the individual comments. If there's additional, if there are additional themes that you're seeing or that you would like to bring up, I think there's, you know, you're certainly welcome, you know, to do that. I'm you know, happy to speak with you directly if there are additional areas that you see. But this is really staff's attempt at boiling down the information. There's a, you know, I think if you gave that assignment to 100 different groups, they'd probably do it 100 different ways, and it might not all be identical. But we are trying, you know, we have a large staff team looking at these, and we're trying to, you know, kind of a large staff team that's representative of different agencies too, with different kind of you know, thinking behind what does that comment actually mean, and doesn't have implications in this chapter or that chapter. So I would say, you know, this is really what we're seeing as the staff, you know, is what we're pulling out, but certainly we are happy to take any feedback from the council members if they are seeing other areas that they think that we're not adequately identifying or missing, or that we should put greater emphasis on. We'd be happy to consider that.
Thank you, Sarah. And I know we've all said it just to the team, you know, what a tremendous effort, because we do know the magnitude of the comments. So thank you for all the hard work to everybody.
This is Doreen, if I could just...
Doreen, you're fading in and out for me. I don't know if that's...
It's also an efficiency.
Okay.
You know, we believe it will...
Doreen, you faded out on me again. Doreen,
Session.
I'm having difficulty hearing you. I'm not sure if others are too. Okay, we just heard the last part that your service isn't good, but you're okay. So sorry, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to jump in there with. All
So,
right.
Eric, can I just give special recognition to Maureen, Jessica, and Jared? I was on 2 of the subgroups, and I think it was a yeoman's effort to facilitate such a broad group of members, and I just really appreciate the effort that they put in to really balance the different opinions that are and experience that are brought out. So I was just impressed with that, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for that, Dennis. I can see the thumbs up from Basil and the clapping from other council members here. I wholeheartedly agree and can't say how much I appreciate all of the staff team's effort on every piece of this. And I know it sometimes might seem like this is kind of being led by me, which to some degree it is, but it wouldn't it would not get done without the staff team. So very much appreciate all the effort and dedication to this. I'm not seeing any additional hands. Raya, your hand is up. That might be a legacy. But I think with that, we've covered everything in the meeting. And Doreen, Basil, not sure if you want to try for audio again, but Doreen?
We'll try. Any
Great.
luck?
Yes, you sound great now.
Oh. Well, we're just pleased to have made it through the meeting. Sorry about the audio issues, but thank you for covering that question, Sarah, and very much looking forward to wrapping up this year as described. So I hope everyone has a great week.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.